Welcome to Powerful Women Off the Record, where real women talk about what it takes to remain authentic while leading in a complex world. I'm your host, Elizabeth Viele. Today I'm joined by Andrea Levere, CEO of Capitalize Good and Social Enterprise Fellow of the Yale School of Management. I was lucky enough to sit on the same board as Andrea, so I can tell you firsthand how she can command a room. I learned a lot from Andrea, and I'm really looking forward to spend some time with her. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get started. Okay, great. All right. Okay. So, Andrea, we were talking a little bit about how I wanted to spend some time with you and talk a little bit like off the record. We've done a lot of, we've done business work together. We've sat on a board together. So I've seen you in action, and I'm just like handpicking the women that I feel have a presence, make an impact, and have somehow maintained their authenticity through the world and kids and careers and leadership positions and health and you name it. So I have a few questions, and I know I didn't give them ahead of time, so but it's just about you and it's about your journey and everything. So the first thing I wanted to ask you is, can you tell me about a time in your life where you knew you had to make a change? So something started feeling out of alignment. Maybe it looked good at first. It started to become out of alignment. What were the triggers that made you realize that you were starting to veer off, the right path for you? Like, was it something in your body? Was it a support system you had? Like, what was it that put the alarm up and said, wait, this might not be the best direction for me? And talk a little bit about that, and then how you found the strength to make that move.
Mm-hmm. My pleasure. And I think this goes back, and we can come back to this, to the gift of having a sense of purpose from a very young age. And I think we can go back to that. So I'll say that I was an activist from a very young age. I went to my first demonstration when I was 11 against the Vietnam War. And a lot of it came from my parents. So that identity was a very powerful identity through high school, actually junior high, and which is what it used to be called, not middle school, high school, and then college. And when I graduated from college and I wanted a career focused on economic and social justice, really, when I graduated, there was just one career, professional career, that you could do. And that was being a legal services lawyer. And but I decided that going right to law school was the chicken's way out. So I didn't take the law boards, and I took a job as a community organizer in the South, working for an extraordinary organization in Nashville, Tennessee, that was building primary healthcare clinics in Appalachia and West Tennessee. After the fellowship, I was hired by Legal Services as an organizer for healthcare. And I thought that was going to be my route to law school. But what happened is I saw these clinics that had been painfully organized over years in these communities fail because people did not know how to finance them and people did not know how to manage them. So all of a sudden, I shifted and I said, people who are interested in social and economic justice need to go to business school. And I was lucky enough to have a friend from college who was at Yale Law School. And he shared with me, because those are the days before email or anything else, right? That they had just created a new school of management that was combining business and society. And so I ended up going to the Yale School of Management. And out of our class, 1/3 of it were people who never imagined themselves going to business school, just like me. They were community organizers themselves. they were teachers, they were social workers, and they all had come to the conclusion that they needed this skill set to be able to do their work. So that to me was the big pivot that I made. And it wasn't as if I felt like I was doing something wrong. I'm sure I could have done great good as a legal services lawyer. But when I think about it, it was a much better match for my skill set and my fascinating with organizational development and other things.
So you knew you had to pivot, and it sounds like you knew you had to pivot because inspiration hit, right? You saw, but also you saw something beautiful failing, right? You saw these important healthcare organizations failing, and so I think that's beautiful because you're being driven by inspiration. It seems like over and over and over again between your
Mm-hmm.
parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
Getting you in at a young age. And then I'm not going to underestimate that friend the friend in college that
Mm-hmm.
you could talk to, especially like you said, back then, there wasn't social media. Like, how would you know? How would you have even know? But somehow that person was in your stratosphere that would know that.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Well, it also is the networks. I mean, I think one of the most powerful forces of my life and career has been the networks that you develop over time. And those networks not only helping to guide you, but also growing with you, right?
Mm,
So I had an extraordinary network of friends from college, all who had the same motivation and had diverse careers. And then the great gift of moving to Nashville was that I was part of an organization that included people at every stage of professional development. You know, you're often surrounded just by peers who are your age, and they only know as much as you know. But the organization, the Center for Health Services that I was part of, had board members who were 10 years older than me, 20 years older than me, 30 years, and incredibly generous with their time. And so that was a gift in terms of people who had already made their careers, and I could see what they were doing and how they did that. And then again, getting to the School of Management and being with a whole nother set of colleagues who I work with to this day,
mm.
40 years later.
Right, right. Generous with their time. You're so right about that. Where how smart for you to be looking at people that are ahead of you, right? And
Mm-hmm.
maybe the next stage, because you just don't waste as much time, right? Like you find
Mm-hmm.
somebody in the next stage that is living a life you want to live, or has the health you want to have, or has the passion. I think that's really, really smart. And I hope the next generation keeps an eye on that too. And
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like your generation got that mentorship, both having a mentor and also being a mentor, and it's just priceless. And it feels like that kept being a repeating theme in your life. Is there any other mentors that you can think of that, I don't know, either gave you the courage uh, to jump bigger than you would have normally, or I don't know, made you see something in yourself that you didn't see originally?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd say they were all through my life. So when I was in college, I was again quite an activist, and the dean of the college, in many ways, became my mentor. And she and
Mm,
I developed a career. I developed a relationship that lasted for years. The same was true with the man who hired me, or for my first job out of college. And he has continued to be a friend over the years. And then I'd say when I moved to the organization, which was the Corporation for Enterprise Development, now called Prosperity Now, the founder of that organization, a man named Bob Friedman, has been an extraordinary colleague and mentor. And I'll say one of the greatest lessons that I've learned from him is the power of a generous brand. You know, our organization had a mission of addressing wealth inequality and then expanded to racial wealth inequality. That is a huge, huge mission. And while at our peak, we had 85 staff, that was just a little drop in the bucket. And so it was very clear that the more generous we were with funding and credit and partnership with organizations around the country, the more trust would come back to us and help us achieve more than we could do by ourselves. And that lesson, particularly as I became president of the organization, has been an enduring lesson and has really helped with what we've been able to accomplish.
It sounds like so I have daughters who are 22, they're
Mm-hmm.
twins. And so they're just launching, they're coming out of college now. And, I talk to them about networking and reaching out and the power of a mentor. And, they're always asking me, well, I don't know, I'm uncomfortable. Like, what's in it for the mentor, kind of thing. Why do they want to take the time to spend with me? But let me ask you this. If you think about young you coming up through the ranks, I mean, I can already imagine you were a firecracker, you're smart, and ambitious, but were there little tricks, like everyday tricks that you used? How do I say this? So that your mentor wanted to work with you? Do you know what I mean? Like, what made you easy to mentor? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question because I've never really thought about that before. So I think once you develop a relationship of trust, that becomes the foundation. I think having a desire to learn from others and being able to respect others. And I guess my other big lesson from decades of managing other people is that the hardest people to manage or mentor or those who do not feel secure in themselves.
Mm.
And I think being able to come to a potential mentor with a sense of who you are and not being threatened by the fact that somebody knows more and has more experience, and in fact, see that as a gift. I think that is a key part. As I went along in my career, I'd say that I had a very simple brand, and my brand was she does what she says. Very simple. Not that I'm changing the world or whatever. And I think when people know they can rely on you, they then reciprocate in other ways. And that has been an incredibly valuable goal of mine.
You talked about your personal brand. Did you always know that concept? Do you know what I mean? Like when you were younger, right? I
Of
know.
course
Like
not.
did you just have a revelation one day and you were like, either I don't know, you're like, this is my personal brand, or somebody said it, and then because I talk a lot about personal brand and to keep an eye on yours and protect it, whatever that might be. So like talk a little bit about that. Like it's authentic. That's why it's a brand and it works. It's not like you're saying, "Oh, I'm gonna make myself this." No, you came in like this, right? And it's something people value. They can count on you. If they give you something, you're going to get it done, or you're gonna at least try your hardest, right? So, does that play out in your life now? And how would you talk to younger women about how important that is?
Right. Well, I think it really started with my family, right? And I think, I grew up in a period of profound change for women, right? In terms of when I started college, all the Ivy League schools were just going co-ed. So I had that opportunity. All of that was happening. But as the oldest child, I often thought about my parents' expectations for me were if I was president of the United States, they would be happy, right? And so I think when I try to motivate myself, particularly for exercise, I go back to what motivated me always, which was to be the best person in the class. So I take exercise classes because that's much more motivating than doing it on my own, because I know that's how I achieve best. So I think it was part of that. And then also understanding that good performance was also including others. It's not just
Mm.
about your own performance. And that goes back to the point about the generous brand. And I think being part of movements and political activity brings that lesson home. You see what the impact is when you collaborate versus when you just do it by yourself. And so when I became president of CFED, or Prosperity Now, it was very much my commitment to my staff that if I commit to you, I'm going to do it. And that set a tone for the rest of the organization, which was deeply appreciated.
So many people talk about how impactful the position you are in your family, right?
Yes.
And I love. I mean, I could talk about this for days. Our relationship with our siblings and how way more impactful that is than people realize, right? A lot of people focus on their childhood and their parents and their upbringing, but holy cow, the sibling relationship is so critical and lasts even longer, right? They're with you well past your when your parents leave. So being the oldest child, I don't know, like, do you think that had anything to do with some of your success, or talk a little bit about that?
Well, I absolutely do. Going back to what I said before, which is, my parents were raised in a time, before feminism was really broadly accepted, right? And my father came from a family of four boys. And at the same time, being the oldest child, you got the most attention for a long period of time, right? And so you were the one that led the way. And I think lots of sexual stereotypes or other things were just abandoned, because it was like our oldest child, and let's just see what she can do.
Yes.
um, what was very interesting about it is that my mother was very political on kind of policy issues, but not on social issues. So my very first demonstration was in eighth grade when I organized eighth graders so that girls could wear pants to school. When I went to a protest against the Vietnam War at 11 years old, my mother was incredibly proud. When I organized a demonstration so girls could wear pants to school, she was not. But it didn't matter.
Interesting.
Within 2 weeks, I kind of testified before the Board of Education, and they changed their policy.
Wait, how old were you when you did
I was
that?
in I was in eighth grade.
No, the Board
So
of Education.
It's just interesting. And I think a lot of that is just experience, right?
Yeah.
In terms of my mother was incredibly intellectual, but at the same time, she grew up in a period of social norms that were profoundly different than the time. And it took a while for her to catch up. Whereas my
Did you
father
wear a
couldn't
pant?
care.
Yeah. Did you wear a pantsuit when you presented?
To the board,
Yeah.
I don't even remember. That is a great question.
Because
I
that's a
don't even
strategic
remember.
decision at that
Yes.
point. You had to make a
Yes.
strat. I'm curious because you were like, I could go either way, right? Like, because
But
at
the
that
other
point you
thing,
already knew
yeah.
how to influence.
But the other thing I'll say is the role of privilege in all this, which I don't think we can forget. So my father was a doctor and had the largest practice in my community, and
Mm.
half of the school board were his patients. So my
Okay.
ability to stand up there, I'm sure they would have been respectful of anybody, but my last name helped.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. You're yes, agreed. And I'm also thinking about how it shaped you because, I don't know if you've read The Outliers from Malcolm Gladwell, but this story just sticks in my head about Bill Gates and one of the ways he was able to become just so proficient in computers and technology at such a young age, some might say it was luck, but to me, I don't think it is. I think it's synchronicity, where there happened to be one of the biggest computer labs in the country nearby his house, and his mom's friend ran it. And so she would let him come in at night when everybody else left. And the mom was okay with him leaving the house at night because she knew where he was going to be. I'm getting chills saying this. And I don't think any of that is on accident or
Exactly. Exactly.
chance, right?
But it's also taking advantage of opportunities,
Exactly.
right? That's
Exactly.
the key ingredient. It's not as many people have opportunities and they don't choose to take advantage of them. And
Yes.
then if they do, they then create the next opportunity for themselves, right?
Yes. Yes. That's so true. And I think sometimes people, the opportunity is right in their face and they don't think of it like, oh, this is an opportunity for me, this is a gift for me, this is just, another thing that's happened in my life. But it sounds like, you were dead on with that, where you could identify. How can you identify, like, an opportunity that feels like the right way? Do you just say like yes to everything, or like do you feel it in your bones when it's right action? Or what kind of inner knowing do you have? How does that play out?
It goes back to your sense of purpose, right? Because not every opportunity is the right opportunity for you, but it may be the right opportunity for someone else. And I think it comes together with understanding your own sense of purpose and where you can add value to an enterprise, but then always being aware of where other people can add value and being able to refer to other people. And I want to add one other thing, Elizabeth, which goes to this, which obviously we've all read about how challenging it is for women in a whole set of different industries and sectors and careers. And I'm not going to say that I didn't face, particularly when I was much younger and right out of business school, some of these same scenarios. But overall, working in the social sector has been a gift. I mean, there are some less than attractive people, but overall, the people that I've been able to spend my career with are some of the most inspiring, wonderful, talented people. And they all could have done something and made much more money, but they've chosen to do this work. And out of that comes both friendships, but also your ability to say, oh, that person is doing this. I trust that person. That aligns with my purpose. Maybe I should take that on. So those two things combined, I think, in a very powerful way.
Mm-hmm. I see the concentric circles where
Yes.
your passion, your talents, and the impact, right? Where they converge is where you should pick your spots. I just want to real quick talk about how you have maintained your level of energy and health so that you could keep giving, right? Because, we talk a lot about this, and a lot of women that I've interviewed talk about the analogy in the airplane, that you put your oxygen mask on first, because you won't be good for anyone if you go down. So what are your little tricks, if you're willing to share any, of how you keep your health up, you keep your energy levels up, everything from, like you mentioned, exercise, or if there's certain like foods, or your whatever you do for quiet time, so that you get back to you.
So I'm going to give the simple answer, and then I'm going to give a much more kind of stunning answer, which you probably don't know about. So with me, it's my family, it's my friends, and it's reading. I'm a passionate reader. We're just about to celebrate the 30th anniversary of my book club. So all
Mm.
of those bring me joy along with travel. But the other thing is that I've had cancer twice.
Oh
I
my
had a
gosh.
very rare form of stomach cancer in 1999. I had the best gastrosurgeon in America, And I was absolutely fine after surgery because there was no other treatment for that cancer when I was diagnosed. A year and a half ago, I was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And because of the extraordinary work of NIH, which is my new passion, given what's happening politically now, uh, the cancer was caused just by one mutation. In 2018, a drug was developed that attacked that mutation directly. Within 5 months, I was almost entirely cancer free. And
Oh
with
my.
additional radiation and surgery, within 11 months of my diagnosis, I was cancer free. So, what I will say is going back to privilege, it was having access to the very best health and medical care that I could, and then having the coverage to be able to cover all the treatments and medication. The medication I'm on
Mm,
now costs $19,000 a month, but with Medicare, I pay $2,000 a year.
mm-hmm.
So I just want to say that that has become, in addition to all the other issues I'm focused on, protecting NIH in light of the attacks that are going on and the incredible research that has made it possible for me to be healthy today.
You're so right. First off, I had no idea. Once again, you're this warrior. You just radiate this you're like, no, I'm going to not accept this. We're just gonna take care of this and move on. And you did what you had to do. And I hear you about not everyone has the same access. And
No.
I that bothers me too. Like, having a shot at good health should be a birthright, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Exactly.
um, there's a few things that should be birthrights, like clean water and health and housing, right? That drive me crazy because to me those are just fundamental human rights that we were supposed to have, and something went off the rails, right? And
Yes.
so thank goodness there's people like you and other people on your team that are still working on that, and that's your passion, because that's what's making you show up for all of us, really.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Exactly.
Wow, that is just amazing, amazing. Did you have any like little health tricks, like you mentioned exercise obviously? Was there anything else you supplemented with, your treatments?
I just did what exactly they told me to do.
You're a good patient.
Right, right. And I follow that along, and
Yeah,
regular checkups and scans, and incredible gratitude for my oncologist and the team that has provided this care, and
sure.
showing that gratitude as well, which is very
Mm.
important, particularly as we're closing in on Thanksgiving.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly, exactly. Wow, amazing. You once again, amaze me with your journey and your strength and all of that. So I'm so happy to know you. I
me
really am.
too, Elizabeth. Me too.
It's amazing. Real quick though, you mentioned a book club, a long-term book club. What
Yes.
is that about?
As soon as my children got to an age where they could, didn't require 24-hour care, one of my dear friends and I decided to create a book club. And I don't know how much you've read about what make book clubs work and what they don't. But the core thing is that people who join agree to the purpose. And our purpose was to discuss the book, not discuss we share our lives, but not focus on social or whatever. And so we've developed a whole approach over the years, and we're all very serious about the book we're reading and about the next book we're choosing. And we came up with a wonderful way after we spent too much time as a group picking the next book, that whoever was hosting, and we rotate through everybody, comes to a book group with anywhere between 1 and 5 choices, and then we make a decision. And that's just worked beautifully.
And this is all in person.
Yes. Well, obviously during
Yes.
COVID, we did it on Zoom.
Yes,
but
right,
now we
right.
do it in person. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And and you talked about your community of family and friends
Mm-hmm.
and the book
Mm-hmm.
club. And that's a resounding theme for a lot of the women I'm speaking with, how critical it is to have that support system.
Yeah. Yes. And very long-term friendships. Again.
Yes, definitely. Well, as we wrap up, is there any advice you'd like to give to some up and coming women that, are starting to feel a little struggle, whether they're juggling being a mom while they're working, or they're running into some barriers in their career or their health, whichever, any advice you'd like to give them?
Well, I'll end where I began, which is to understand what really motivates you and what gives where your passions are. And it's not always possible to follow those passions at every stage in your career, but do that and also understand that work isn't everything. And there are times in your life when you need to dial back some because your children are young. I worked 4 days a week when my kids were young. And I'll just add one more thing in terms of people being able to adapt and accept reality. When people ask me how I balanced work and career, for many, many years, I used to say, well, we always had great childcare. For many years, we understood we weren't going to save any money, but that was the right investment. We had relatively equal responsibilities, my husband and I. But one day I realized those were important, but those were not the key issues. It was that neither of my children had a major learning or health disability. If either of those things had been true, who knows what I could have done. And so I just want to say that to people because I've had many friends who've had this reality and it changes everything. So give yourself a break.
I am with you. Once again,
Yeah,
the gratitude of being spared that,
yeah.
and then everyone that is going through that, give yourself the grace
Give
to,
yourself the grace. Yes.
yeah, to
Yeah.
know you've got a challenge. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
beautiful. Before we close, I want to sincerely thank you, Andrea, for sharing your time and perspective with us today. These conversations matter, and I am so grateful for your openness. Thank you so much. You've been listening to Powerful Women Off the Record with Elizabeth Veely. If this conversation resonated, please like it and hit subscribe on YouTube. You can also follow me on Instagram and LinkedIn. And remember, define yourself or someone else will. I'll see you next time.